6,000 years ago, in the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians were already documenting things that modern science is still trying to explain. They spoke of cycles in the sky, secrets of time, and knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. Because if they were the first, like we were taught, then why does it feel like they weren't guessing but remembering? Isn't it a little weird that we never really learned about the Sumerians in school? The people who literally invented civilization, writing, cities, law, timekeeping, and yet most of us hear nothing about them unless we go looking ourselves. Well, I did go looking, and what I found actually shocked me, because the Sumerians knew things that they probably shouldn't have. 5,000 years ago, they were already tracking the moon's phases, building lunar calendars, and using a base 60 number system that we still use today in our own clocks. So every time you check the clock, you're using Sumerian mathematics. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. That base 60 system wasn't random. It was engineered for astronomy, for calculating cycles, angles, and motions in the heavens. Later, Babylonian astronomers expanded on it, mapping constellations, tracking planets, and predicting seasons. But then we encounter something else, something that pushes curiosity into unease. Where on earth did their writing system come from? Because cuneiform appears suddenly in the archaeological record, not as a simple scratches on a piece of clay, but as structured writing, a system capable of recording language, trade, law, and mythology. Writing is one of the hardest inventions in human history. Every other culture that developed it left behind transitional steps. Sumer did not. It appears complete from the start. So how can you explain that? They divided the sky into constellations, tracked the paths of planets, and understood patterns like retrograde motion long before telescopes ever existed. The Sumerians recorded the 584-day cycle of Venus with such accuracy that modern astronomers still study their records today. And that's not fringe, that's documented on tablets we've translated. They didn't just tell us stories, they were running observatories out of temples. And if this next artifact depicts what it looks like it depicts, then it shouldn't exist. The cylinder seal, known as VA243, found in Mesopotamia. It shows a large central object surrounded by 11 smaller orbs, 12 bodies in total. Now, the mainstream dismissed this as just pure coincidence because, as far as we are aware, the Sumerians couldn't actually see certain planets like Pluto with the naked eye. So, are we just supposed to believe that the Sumerians had a lucky guess? Yes. In the Sumerian texts, they only really talk about 5 planets, and those are the planets that can be seen with the naked eye. However, this cylinder seal kind of throws the question in the air, because why would they draw or why would they create extra planets if they didn't know they were there? That's the question. That's the mystery. And if you're ever interested in seeing the real cylinder seal for yourself, then it is actually on display in Germany in a museum in Berlin. Now, here is something you may want to consider. The Sumerians, they told us themselves where they got the knowledge from. They told us that they were given the knowledge by the Anunnaki. To the Sumerians, the Anunnaki were a group of deities who descended from the heavens to decree the fate of humanity, control nature, and even create mankind through genetic engineering. Of course, just like most things, it's quickly brushed off as mythology to the mainstream. There's no such thing as Anunnaki. They did not come down from the heavens and give humanity knowledge. Now, some of you will know I have a different opinion on the Anunnaki. I personally believe, or I struggle to say believe, but I think that maybe the Anunnaki weren't aliens that came down or extraterrestrials, that maybe in fact they might have been survivors of a lost civilization. But that is a completely different video that I've already covered. Back on point. If it doesn't fit the narrative, mainstream will brush it off as myth. It's that simple. Just like the Sumerian kings list that I actually had the privilege of going to see with my own eyes at a museum in Oxford, England. And I can tell you it was a magnificent experience to be stood right in front of it. But the mainstream, they dismiss the Sumerian kings list as myth because it talks about rulers before the flood, or should I say kings before the flood, that lived for thousands of years. So quickly it becomes a myth. Now, of course, I'm not saying that rulers did rule for thousands of years. I actually heard an explanation a couple of months ago where someone said, maybe it's not years, maybe it's days. I mean, that could potentially make sense. However, we are still talking about kings that existed before a global cataclysm wiped people out, and that does not fit well into the current narrative that unfortunately we do get spoon-fed. That is why it is considered myth. And here's a big mystery, because when the Sumerians burst onto the scene 6,000 years ago, they seem to have burst onto the scene actually, with advanced knowledge for their time. They seem to have mastered agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, city planning. You see, they seem to have this knowledge that just looks like it came from nowhere. And that is why the mystery is very much alive. And when the Sumerians tell us themselves that they were given the knowledge by advanced beings, you can't help but think that maybe they were actually telling us the truth and they were given knowledge by advanced beings. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean extraterrestrials. That could mean a lost civilization that collapsed and was fanning around the world and passing on their knowledge. On that point, I'm very interested to know what you actually think about that. So, maybe drop it in the comments if you can, just to let me know what you think. Were the Sumerians telling us the truth, or is it all just one big coincidence? Now, this is the part of the video that is probably going to be a bit controversial for some people, because there are parallels between the Bible and the Sumerian ancient texts that came thousands of years before it. One of the most known ones is, say, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood story, and the parallels with Noah that came, I think, like 1,000 years after. Now, stay tuned to the channel, right? Because I'm going to be covering the parallels between modern day religions and ancient texts and see where they actually sort of line up. Now, I'm not here to diss your religion. If you are a Christian, whatever you are, listen, I'm not here to diss your religion. If you believe, then brilliant. That's good for you. But I will be doing the parallels. If you're interested, even if you are a religious person, if you're still interested, then, subscribe to the channel. Because like I said, I'm not here to bash you. I'm not here to put you down or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know if it'll be the next video, but it's coming soon. I will be covering that because there are parallels to it.